What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Fantasy Gods. As always, my name is Brett Chaves.
And I'm Toby White.
Toby, this is your last one in the digital studios. It's tough to see you go, but why not finish how we started here on Fantasy Gods?
Yeah, for sure. And let's finish on a high note because you had to replace me with someone else.
Come on. You know I'm never going to replace you, Toby. But anyways, let's get jumping right into this episode. We're going to start off with our way too early fantasy football predictions and advice. So let's get right into it, Toby.
Let's jump right into it. And we're going to talk about our top 7 players coming up for fantasy this season and what dream team you can make. And first, let's start off with good old Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, definitely. Let's start off with Patrick Mahomes, the big-time Kansas City quarterback, pretty much the face of the NFL right now. Last season for fantasy, owners saw him produce around 25 to 26 points per game, depending on where you were in the season. Unfortunately, he had that big surgery, as we saw some pictures today from the Masters tournament, I should say, on his boot. But he should be good to go from what we understand for OTAs and off-season events. But Patrick Mahomes should be seeing the same production that we saw from him last season. Fantasy owners should potentially look to grab him in potentially the first round or maybe even late second, depending on where he falls and how he produces with his injury. But I still like Patrick Mahomes, whether or not you decide to take him in the first or second round.
Yeah, but you don't want to waste your first-round pick on a quarterback, so you want to get the skills position first. And going into our skills positions, let's talk about Derrick Henry.
Let's just jump right into Derrick Henry. There's a lot to say about this guy right now. 2,000 yards rushing last season. Unbelievable statistic for any running back. I believe the last player to do it was Adrian Peterson with the Minnesota Vikings. Take that into account a long time ago. But nonetheless, Derrick Henry is going to be a monster this season. Should be a top 10 pick in every ESPN, Yahoo, CBS, whatever fantasy league you play in. He is a top 10 selection. He will produce you numbers more towards the back half of the season as he normally does. He normally gets off to a slow start and then picks up his numbers towards the end. But nonetheless, a top 10 pick, more of a patient selection, but Derrick Henry is the man.
Yeah. Especially that they're going to have zero, they're not going to have that many weapons outside, so it's basically going to be run the ball more with him. And let's see how Tennessee would do for this year. And, Brad, let's talk about your favorite player.
Yeah, I'm repping his jersey right now. Let's talk about Calvin Ridley, the wide receiver from the Atlanta Falcons. We've seen Julio Jones kind of reduce his production the past 3 seasons, and Calvin Ridley has become more of the main option for Matt Ryan and the Falcons. This man can do whatever you want. He can run a go route, go 40 yards deep, and score a touchdown. He can catch a flea flicker and throw it deep. He can do whatever you want. Calvin Ridley is one of the best wide receivers in football right now. He produces very good numbers, around 15 to 20 points per game, depending on where you have him. His only liability is he's a bit of an injury risk sometimes. Sometimes he's, limping off the field and can be lingering injuries between 1 to 2 weeks. But nonetheless, Calvin Ridley, a great pick, and he should be a first-rounder this year.
Yeah, especially if they go after a quarterback in the draft, then it would be better.
Yeah, we'll see what Atlanta does in the draft. It's a very interesting pick that they have with the 4th pick. They could trade back. They could still take a QB like Justin Fields, maybe even Trey Lance. Who knows who could be there, but it all depends on what they do in the draft and what they plan on doing with offense with new head coach Arthur Smith.
Yeah. So let's talk about my favorite player. So Christian McCaffrey, even though he played 3 games this past year, Carolina is now a dark horse for this year, and I feel like with Sam Darnold, their offensive scheme is going to be much more better than it was last year. So you might see that win total might go up.
I agree with you. I think that Carolina, they're in a bit of an interesting position this year. Not only are you moving on from Teddy Bridgewater and switching to a younger guy, Sam Darnold, but you're also trying to use him and combine all of these other pieces. You're losing Curtis Samuel, so now you're forced to almost incorporate guys like Ian Thomas if they keep him as their starter, and you also have guys like Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore as well. So you have to factor all those things into account. But nonetheless, Christian McCaffrey should see the same amount of production that he had last season when he was healthy. Unfortunately, he was out for the majority due to injury risks and concerns. Mike Davis was the majority starter for Carolina last season. But a healthy Christian McCaffrey is the best running back in this league.
Yeah, and now let's go into our final few, starting with Travis Kelce.
So, Travis Kelce has been the best tight end in the NFL. Obviously, he's had competition with George Kittle, now the up-and-coming Logan Thomas, other players to be named. But Travis Kelce's been the most consistent fantasy tight end for so many years. I mean, we saw this year him producing over 20 points per game. Absurd number for a tight end. You just don't see that at all. That's quarterback numbers at your tight end position. The other tight end to do that was Taysom Hill. And the only reason why he did that is because he was eligible as a QB and a tight end at the same time. So for him to do those kinds of numbers as a tight end alone says something for this guy. He stands on his own pedestal, and I think Travis Kelce will be the best tight end in fantasy next year.
And let's hope that Kansas City will be back to the promised land, to the Super Bowl. And now let's go into the defense that surprised all of us this year.
For sure. Let's move into the Indianapolis Colts defense this year. Shocker. Xavier Rhodes exceeded expectations. You still have Darius Leonard. You have DeForest Buckner, who they picked up in the trade with the 49ers. This is a great defense all around, especially with an offensive coach in the Indianapolis Colts. Very offensive-minded from what you see with them. I'm almost surprised as well to see this defense do this well, but they should be the best defense next year. Keith Butler and the Steelers have always had concerns, with how consistent that they play. We saw it last season, how they fell apart. This Indianapolis Colts defense should be reliable for you, and they should be the best defense, number one ranked in most fantasy leagues.
Yeah, especially their division too, because you don't know what this situation is going to be with the Texans. The Jaguars are up and coming with hopefully the first pick they will get is Trevor Lawrence, which I'm hoping for so I can buy a jersey. But I feel like the coach should be the prime front runner for this division for the AFC South.
I agree with you. So let's move into our final pick here, a bit of a dark horse that we selected here. Ryan Fitzpatrick from the Washington football team now, no longer with the Miami Dolphins. He is set up for big-time success in Washington. Not only is Ron Rivera, the second-year head coach now of the football team for their former Panthers head coach, not only is he working together with second-year Antonio Gibson, newly acquired Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin, Logan Thomas that we just mentioned, now you add a veteran guy like Ryan Fitzpatrick into the equation, who is known to have fantasy success. He can put up huge numbers in a short span of time. He actually holds the record right now for most fantasy points combined within the first 3 weeks of the season when he was with Tampa Bay. I would not be surprised at all if he does the same thing, if not beat his own record this season with Washington. He's got the talent, he's got the skills, he's got the coaching. The question is, does he put it all together and be a fantasy stud?
Yeah, especially Ryan Fitzpatrick has been all over the place. He has a massive beard, so you know he definitely is an awesome guy to be around. But he can change around a team like that. Especially the weapons in Washington. He knows what's going to happen when it's going to happen. And I wouldn't be surprised Washington is the front runner in the NFC East.
I couldn't agree with you more, Toby. So with that, that's going to wrap up our final episode this semester for Fantasy Gods. As always, my name is Brett Chaves.
And I'm Toby White. Keep calm and play fantasy.